I still remember the exact second my phone lit up. It was a Tuesday. Nothing special about that Tuesday. I was sitting on my couch with my legs tucked under me, half watching something on TV that I couldn't tell you the name of right now if you asked. My coffee had gone cold. My cat was asleep on the armchair across the room. Everything was exactly the way a Tuesday evening is supposed to feel. Quiet. Predictable. Safe. And then my phone buzzed. I picked it up without even looking at who it was from. That's the thing about the life I had built for myself. I wasn't really expecting anything from anyone. I had gotten comfortable with that, with the low hum of a life that never surprised me. I looked at the screen. It was a photo, a selfie. She was standing in front of a mirror. The lighting was warm, one of those soft lamps that make everything look like a memory before it even becomes one. Her hair was down, a little wavy, like she hadn't tried too hard but had definitely tried. She was wearing a dark green top, and she was looking at the camera with this expression that I can only describe as intentional, like she had taken this photo for someone specific, like it was meant to land somewhere and do something when it arrived. It landed on me, and it did something. 2 seconds later, another message. Oh my God, I am so sorry. That was meant for my friend Priya. We have almost the same name in my contacts, and I'm dying. Please ignore that. I'm so sorry. I read that message 3 times. I should have typed back something simple. No worries. Ha ha ha. Happens to the best of us. And moved on. I didn't move on. I put my phone face down on the couch cushion. I looked at the ceiling. My coffee was cold. My cat was still asleep. The TV was still on. But something had shifted. Something I wouldn't be able to name for a very long time. Let me tell you who she was. And let me tell you who I was before that photo arrived. Because neither one of us ended up being who we thought we were at the start of this. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Her name was Daniela. I had known her for almost 2 years before that night, and for most of those 2 years I would have told you, without hesitation, that she was just my coworker. A friend, even, if you stretched it. The kind of person you grab lunch with on a Wednesday, because you both happened to be hungry at the same time, and neither of you felt like sitting alone. We worked at the same marketing agency in Austin. Not the glamorous kind of marketing, the kind where you spend 3 weeks arguing about the right shade of blue for a client's email banner. We were on adjacent teams. Her desk was close enough to mine that I could hear her laugh without trying to, and her laugh was okay. Her laugh was specific. I want to be precise about this. It wasn't a polished laugh. It wasn't the kind of laugh people do when they're aware that someone might be watching. It was the real one. The one that starts in the chest and gets out before she could decide whether to let it. A little too loud sometimes. Occasionally at the wrong moment in a meeting. She would cover her mouth after, like she was trying to put it back in. I noticed that laugh on her first week. I told myself I noticed it the way you notice anything that's a little different from the background noise of an office. The way you notice a new coffee mug on a coworker's desk. Incidental. Meaningless. We became the kind of close that happens by proximity. Lunch. Shared complaints about the same slow printer. A group chat with 3 other people from our floor that mostly existed so we could send each other memes about corporate life. Daniela was always the first one to respond in that chat. Always with something that made me actually laugh out loud in a way that made me immediately look around to see if anyone noticed. Her life, from what I understood of it, was full. She had a lot of friends. The kind of person who always seemed to have plans on the weekend, always had a story that started with, "So last night." She talked about her family warmly and often. She called her mom every Sunday. She had opinions about everything. Restaurants, movies, the way people merged on the highway. and she delivered those opinions like they were obvious facts that the rest of the world had somehow missed. My life, at the same time, was fine. I want to be careful with that word. Fine. Because fine isn't bad. Fine is more fine. I had my apartment, which I liked. I had my cat, Muriel, who tolerated me. I had a routine that worked. I had friendships I maintained with the right amount of effort. I had a relationship that had ended about 8 months before that Tuesday, cleanly, without drama, in the way that some endings happen when two people run out of reasons to stay, rather than reasons to go. I hadn't been devastated by that ending, and I remember thinking that was the healthy response, that I was doing well. Looking back, I think what I was actually doing was standing still, moving through my days without any real friction, without anything that pushed back against me hard enough to make me feel my own edges. Daniela pushed back. Not aggressively. Not in any way I would have identified as significant at the time. She just had this quality of full presence that made everything around her slightly more vivid. A conversation with her felt like a conversation, not just an exchange of words while two people waited for the workday to end. When she asked how your weekend was, she listened to the answer. When she disagreed with you, she said so, directly, with this little tilt of her head like she was genuinely trying to understand where you went wrong. I was not used to being paid that kind of attention. I thought I didn't need it. The thing about a Tuesday that starts like any other Tuesday is that you don't realize until much later that it wasn't. After the accidental selfie, she texted me the next morning. Okay, I have been thinking about this, and I feel like I owe you coffee as an apology. Which is convenient because I was going to get some anyway. Wanna come? I said yes. We got coffee from the place 2 blocks from the office. We stood outside because the tables were full. She was wearing a gray sweater. The October air in Austin was just starting to have a bite to it. She held her coffee cup with both hands and she apologized again. Properly this time. And I told her it was genuinely not a big deal. And she said, "You're being too nice about this." And I said, "I'm really not." And she laughed, that real laugh, and said, "Okay, I believe you." And that was it. That was the whole conversation. 3 minutes, maybe. We walked back to the office. The morning continued. Nothing happened, except that I thought about it for the rest of the day. Not obsessively. Not in a way I could have pointed to and said, "Look, there it is." The moment things changed. More like a low-frequency hum that I kept noticing when things got quiet. The way she had held her coffee cup with both hands. The way she said, "I believe you," like it was something she had actually decided after consideration, not just a reflex. I started noticing things I hadn't been noticing before. The way she smelled of something warm and cedarish when she leaned over my desk to look at my screen. The specific pause she took before she said something she thought was funny, like she was giving herself one last chance to decide against it. The fact that when she was concentrating, she pressed her lips together very slightly, and her whole face went somewhere internal and quiet, somewhere I wanted to follow. I told myself I was just paying more attention, that I had been on autopilot for months and something had shaken me out of it. Not her specifically. Just life. The universe reminding me to look up from my phone. That was a very tidy explanation. I was comfortable with it. Then, about 3 weeks after the accidental photo, we had a work thing. A team dinner at a restaurant downtown. One of those team bonding events that the office organized twice a year, and everyone complained about and then actually enjoyed once they got there. A long table, too much bread in the basket, everyone a little looser than usual because there was wine. Daniela was across from me and 2 seats down. We weren't even directly facing each other, but at some point in the middle of the dinner, one of our co-workers, a woman named Becca, told a story. One of those long, winding, ultimately not that remarkable stories. And Daniela caught it before the punchline and started laughing before it landed, in that way that only happens when you know someone well enough to see where they're going. And then she looked up. She looked directly at me. Not at Becca. Not at the table. At me. Like I was the person she wanted to share that moment with. Like I was the one she expected to also be laughing before the punchline. The one who would understand. I was. I laughed at the exact same moment she did. And she pointed at me across the table like, "See, you got it too." And then the dinner kept moving. The conversation shifted. Someone refilled the breadbasket. I drove home alone that night, and I sat in my car in the parking garage for about 4 minutes before I went inside. I didn't know what I was sitting with. I just knew I was sitting with something. I started paying attention to whether she texted me outside of work. She did. Not constantly. Not in any way that seemed like a pattern if you were looking from the outside. A link to an article she thought I'd like. A complaint about a client that was too specific to put in the group chat. Once, a photo of a dog she had seen on a walk that she said, and I quote, "looked exactly like it was having an experience and not just a Tuesday." I laughed at that one for an embarrassingly long time. I told myself we were just friends who had found their frequency. That happens. That's allowed. That's a good thing, actually. Finding someone at work who gets you, who makes the 40-hour week feel like less of an endurance event. I was grateful for it. I told myself it was that simple. Here is what I did not tell myself. That I had started angling my desk chair very slightly toward the direction of her desk. That I had started checking my phone first thing in the morning, not because I was expecting anything, but because I was hoping. That I had replayed the moment at the dinner table, that pointed finger, that shared laugh across the distance, more times than any brain with a fully functioning sense of proportion should have. I was very good at not telling myself things. But the things were happening anyway. There was a night in November. We had stayed late at the office, just the two of us, finishing up a presentation for a client pitch the following morning. Everyone else had left by 7. By 8:30, it was just us and the overhead lights and the cold coffee we had both stopped pretending to drink. We finished the deck. She leaned back in her chair and stretched her arms over her head and said, "Okay, that's either really good or I'm too tired to tell the difference." I told her it was really good. She looked at me like she was deciding whether to believe that. Then she decided she did. We should have left right after that. We didn't. We ended up sitting there for another hour, talking about nothing important. She told me about a trip she had taken to New Mexico when she was in college, a solo road trip she had done on a whim at 22, and the way she described the landscape, flat and pink and impossibly wide, made me feel like I could see it. She asked me what the most spontaneous thing I had ever done was, and I thought about it honestly, and said I didn't think I had ever done anything truly spontaneous in my adult life. And instead of laughing at that, she looked at me with something that was very close to concern and said, "We should fix that." Not, "That's too bad." Not, "Wow, that's so you. We should fix that." Like it was a project we would undertake together. Like that was already decided. I looked at my hands. I said something like, "Yeah, probably." We left together. The parking lot was almost empty. Our cars were near each other. We stopped walking at the same time, at the same point, the way you do when you're both about to say goodbye and neither of you has moved toward their car yet. She was standing close enough that I could see the mascara that had faded from under her right eye, just slightly. The parking lot light caught the edge of her cheekbone. I was aware of the temperature. I was aware of how quiet it was. She said, "I'm glad we stayed late." I said, "Me too." And there was a pause. Not an awkward one. A full one. A pause that had something in it. She smiled first. Then she said, "Good night," and walked to her car. I walked to mine. I sat inside for a moment before starting the engine. My hands were on the steering wheel, and they were not entirely steady. I told myself I was tired. That was all. Long day, late night. My nervous system was just catching up. I knew that wasn't it. Here is what I knew that I was not saying out loud to myself or to anyone else. I had started to feel, in her presence, like a version of myself I had not met yet. More awake, more interested. Like my own thoughts were worth more when I was about to share them with her. And I knew that wasn't friendship. I knew what friendship felt like. I had enough of it to compare. But naming it felt enormous. Naming it meant looking at my whole life and asking questions I had not prepared answers for. It meant looking at the relationship I had ended 8 months ago and asking whether it had ever fit the way I had believed it did. It meant looking at every time I had explained away my own feelings with the word tired or weird day or just overthinking. So I didn't name it. I drove home. I poured a glass of water. I watched half of something on television. I went to bed. Muriel slept at the foot of the bed the way she always did. Everything looked the same. In December, Daniela mentioned, casually, the way she always mentioned things. Like she was giving you information you could do what you wanted with. That she was thinking about applying for a senior position at a bigger firm in Chicago. That they had reached out to her. That she hadn't decided anything yet. I nodded. I said something like, "That would be an amazing opportunity." My voice was completely steady. Inside, something went very quiet. Not panic, not grief. Just the silence that happens when you realize you have been counting on something without ever consciously deciding to. When the thing you built your days around reveals itself by threatening to be removed. I went home that night, and I sat on my couch with Muriel on my lap, and I thought about the parking lot. I thought about the dinner table and the pointed finger. I thought about the New Mexico road trip and we should fix that. I thought about the accidental selfie and what I had felt in the 2 seconds before I read the follow-up apology. I thought about the fact that I had never, in my life, felt the particular quality of loneliness that I was feeling right then, which was not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being right next to something and choosing to stay on the wrong side of it. She hadn't decided anything yet, but I was sitting there in the dark, trying very hard not to figure out what I was actually afraid of. Here's the thing about feelings that are too big to name. They don't wait forever. They don't sit quietly in the corner while you sort through other things. They grow. They reorganize your whole interior without your permission. They start showing up in your face and your voice and the way you hold yourself when she walks into a room, and at some point the people around you start being able to see what you haven't said yet. My friend Cassie saw it first. We were getting dinner in late December, just the two of us, a place in South Congress we liked. We were talking about the holidays, about plans, about nothing. And then she put down her fork and looked at me and said, "Who is she?" Just like that. Out of nowhere. I said, "What?" Cassie said, "You have the look. You've had the look for a while. I've been waiting for you to tell me." I told her she was imagining things. She didn't argue. She just picked up her fork and said, "Okay," in the tone of someone who has decided to wait. I drove home with my jaw tight and my hands too careful on the wheel. I didn't sleep much that night. But before we continue, if you made it this far, you already know this feeling. That particular kind of silence. Sitting with something you haven't said yet, hoping nobody looks at you too carefully before you're ready. So, hit the like button right now. It lets me know this story is landing where it's supposed to. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now and turn on the bell. That way YouTube tells you the moment the next story goes up here on this channel. Now tell me in the comments, have you ever had a moment where someone saw something in you before you could see it yourself? A friend who asked the question you weren't ready for? Write it down for me. I read every single one. And tell me what city you're watching from. I'll heart every comment. Now, back to the story. She didn't take the Chicago job. She told me in January, at lunch, the same unremarkable Wednesday kind of lunch we had been having for 2 years. She said she had thought about it seriously, had even done 2 more rounds of interviews, and then one morning she woke up and just knew. She didn't want to start over somewhere cold, she said. She liked her life here. She liked the people in it. She was looking at her sandwich when she said that last part. Then she looked up. I said, "I'm glad you're staying," and my voice came out lower than I intended. She held my gaze for a moment longer than she needed to. Then she said, "Yeah, me too." We ate our sandwiches. We walked back to the office. The afternoon happened the way afternoons happen. But something was different now, and I think we both knew it. The thing about making a decision, even a decision you don't say out loud, is that it rearranges you. She had made one. I could feel it. And I was slowly, terribly, beginning to understand that I needed to make one too. The question was not whether I felt something. I had stopped being able to argue with that. The question was what I was going to do with it, what I was willing to risk, what I was willing to look at directly instead of from the side, the way I had been doing for months. January became February. I kept waiting for the feeling to quiet down. It didn't. It did the opposite. I started noticing, and this is the part that shook me the most, I started noticing what I had been filling my life with for years. The fineness, the smoothness, the way I had arranged my days to require as little from me as possible. The relationship that had ended not with a bang, but with a mutual shrug. The friendships I maintained at a careful, comfortable distance. The way I had learned to feel content with a life that never once surprised me. And then I looked at how I felt in the orbit of this specific person. Awake, edgy, interested, sometimes actually nervous, sometimes actually delighted. And I thought, oh, this is what I was missing. Not her, necessarily. Not yet. But this quality of being fully present in my own life. I had been sleepwalking and she had woken me up by accident, with a selfie meant for someone else. The breaking point came on a Friday night in late February. There was a birthday party for someone from the office. A big group thing, a bar in East Austin, loud music. The kind of event where you spend most of your time in a tight cluster with the people you actually know. Daniela and I ended up in that cluster together. We always did. We had become that specific kind of anchor to each other in social situations. The person you check in with when the room gets overwhelming. The person whose face you look for across a crowd before you've decided to look. At some point the night got loud and we stepped outside. Just to breathe. Just for a minute. The street was cool. February in Austin. She had a jacket on and I didn't. And she noticed. And she made a small sound of disapproval that made me laugh. We stood on the sidewalk and talked about nothing and everything, and at some point she said, quietly, almost to herself, "You know, I really wanted to call you when I was deciding about Chicago." I turned to look at her. "I almost did," she said. "Several times." "Why didn't you?" She looked at me for a long moment. Long enough that I became aware of my own heartbeat. "I didn't know what I would have said," she said. "And I think I was scared of what you would have said back." The street was quiet enough that I could hear the music from inside the bar, muffled. A car passed. Neither of us moved. I understood in that moment something I had been refusing to understand for months. She wasn't describing proximity. She wasn't describing friendship. She was describing the same careful choreography I had been performing. The circling, the almost, the holding back. She was showing me her cards, and she was shaking. And there it was. The truth that had been building since October, since a selfie with warm lamp lighting arrived in the wrong window. She was just as terrified as I was, and she was the one who had gotten there first, who had looked directly at it, who was standing on a sidewalk in February, telling me without saying it, showing me without showing it, waiting. The person I had assumed was steady and sordid and certain, she wasn't. She had been right here, in the same fog, making the same wrong turns. I was not who I thought I was, and neither was she. Neither of us spoke right away. I think we both needed a second with what had just been said, or not said. Or said in the way that things get said when people are too scared to use the actual words. I looked at the sidewalk for a moment. Then I looked at her. She was watching me with this expression I had never seen on her before. Quieter than her usual self. Softer, like she had put down something heavy and was now waiting to find out whether she had put it down in the right place. She was the one who looked away first. I had always assumed, from the very first day I had registered her existence as more than background noise in an office, that she was the confident one, the one who knew herself, the one who walked into rooms and took up the exact right amount of space without calculating it. She was always the one with plans, with stories, with opinions delivered like facts. I was the one who sat still, the one who watched from the edges, the one who had built a life specifically designed to not require too much of me. And yet, she was the one standing on the sidewalk having just admitted in so many carefully not words that she had almost called me a dozen times and hadn't been able to. That she had made a decision about her whole life, a city, a career, a future. And my response to that decision had been a variable she had to factor in. She had been uncertain this whole time. And I had been so busy watching her that I hadn't noticed. The inversion of it settled over me slowly, like the temperature dropping, like something clicking into its actual shape after being slightly wrong for a long time. I was the one who spoke first. I said, "I would have told you to stay." She turned back to look at me. "I would have told you to stay," I said again, "because I didn't want to figure out what Tuesday nights felt like without your name coming up on my phone at some point." She made a small sound, not a laugh, not quite. Something between a laugh and a breath. "That's a very specific way to say that," she said. "I'm not good at the general way." She looked at me for a long moment, and I watched the thing that had always looked like certainty on her. The ease, the confidence, the way she took up space. I watched it come apart slightly, very slightly, and underneath it I saw something younger and more honest. Something that had been waiting to be seen. She reached over and took my hand. Not dramatically. Not in the way that things happen in movies, with music and perfect lighting and a line that lands exactly right. She just reached over and held it. Her hand was cold from the February air. She didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. We stood there on the sidewalk while the music thumped inside the bar behind us, and the street was quiet, and I thought about all the versions of both of us that had been wrong. I had been so certain I was the steady one, the one who moved through her days without friction, without surprise, without need. I had called that stability. I had called it being fine. But standing there with her cold hand in mine, I understood that what I had actually been doing was protecting myself from exactly this, from something that could shift the whole architecture, from something real enough to risk being wrong about. She had looked like the fearless one. She had looked like someone who never second-guessed herself, who never lay awake running the same 3 minutes of a parking lot conversation on a loop. But she had been doing exactly that. She had been second-guessing herself all the way to Chicago and back. We were both, it turned out, afraid of the same thing. And we had both been the one waiting for the other to move first. She squeezed my hand once. Very slightly. The way you do when you're checking that something is real. I squeezed back. Neither of us had saved the other. That wasn't the story. We were just two people who had been standing on opposite sides of something for a long time. And then, on a sidewalk in February, one of us said almost something and the other one answered, and we ended up on the same side. That was enough. That was actually more than enough. I've thought a lot about that accidental photo, about the 15 seconds between receiving it and reading the apology, about what those 15 seconds held before I knew they weren't meant for me. Sometimes the thing that changes everything looks exactly like a mistake. Sometimes the person who shakes your whole interior loose is standing 2 seats down at a work dinner, laughing before the punchline, looking right at you. And sometimes the most courageous thing isn't the dramatic moment. It's the parking lot, the late office, the sidewalk in February. The small, honest answer to an almost said thing. If this story found something in you, type discovery in the comments, so I know you made it here with me. And if you want more stories that feel like this, real, and a little terrifying and true, the next one is already on your screen. Big hug. Until the next story. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description.